Showing God's kindness. 2 Samuel chapter 9. King David was leading Israel through its golden era, and the people loved him for it. Like never before, Israel was experiencing such prosperity and victory under the strength of David's leadership. King David could just ride upon his royal success for years to come, and all the people would gladly serve him. Yet instead of looking only to his own future, David chose to look back at former years. He recalled Saul's reign. You'd think that David would want to forget those difficult years. However, he wondered if there was anyone left in the house of Saul, that he might show kindness to them for the sake of Jonathan. David made a covenant with Jonathan about 20 years prior, and he was now determined to fulfill it. He made a promise to take care of any of Jonathan's descendants. David was a man of his word and a true friend. David met with Ziba, a servant from the house of Saul, and he asked if there were any descendants of Saul still living. This was probably a terrifying moment for Ziba. Most kings would ask that question in order to kill off possible threats from a previous dynasty. Instead, David revealed his heart of kindness. He wanted to show the kindness of God toward the descendants of Saul because of the covenant he made with Jonathan. Ziba reported that there was a young descendant still alive. His name was Mephibosheth, and he lived at the house of Machir. Mephibosheth was crippled in his feet from an accident that happened when he was a child. His maidservant dropped him while she fled after hearing about his father's death. She thought that David wanted to kill Mephibosheth to completely wipe out the house of Saul. 20 years later, we see quite the contrary. David summoned Mephibosheth to come, and when he arrived, he fell on his face and paid homage to David. Overwhelmed with joy, David exclaimed his name, Mephibosheth, and began to immediately relieve his fears and shame by telling Mephibosheth what the king wanted to do for him. David was going to provide land, servants, and a forever seat at the table of the king. Mephibosheth was humbled by David's kindness. He asked, "What is your servant that you should show regard for a dead dog such as I?" David saw something different, though. He saw the son of his best friend. He saw a lowly, crippled man who could use the same care and kindness that his father Jonathan had shown to David years before. David set Mephibosheth up to have a successful future. He commissioned Ziba along with his 15 sons and 20 servants to take care of Mephibosheth and his son Micah by providing for their every need. That would have been enough to fulfill his part of the covenant, but David told Mephibosheth that he would give him a seat at the king's table always. Any time Mephibosheth wanted, he could eat in the presence of the king like he was a son of the king. This story resembles our relationship with Jesus in many ways. First, David sought Mephibosheth when he wasn't seeking him. Jesus has sought us even when we were not looking for him. Like David, Jesus leads a kingdom that is focused on the success of others. When David found Mephibosheth, he called him by name and gave him an inheritance. Jesus has done that for each one of us. We are like crippled and undeserving people from a kingdom of opposition. But now we have humbly received a seat always at the table of the King. We can sit always in Jesus' presence like we are sons of the King, because that is what we are. Just as David remembered his covenant, Jesus will always remember his covenant with us. Like David, Jesus is driven to show the kindness of God to those he is in covenant with. Like David, Jesus keeps his word, and he is a true friend.